I discovered a demonic statue in my church. I've always been a devout person ever since I was a child. My family has attended St. Margaret's Church every Sunday. Without fail, it's a small, humble building that sits quietly on the edge of our town, a place where time seems to slow down. Most people find solace in its beauty, the stained glass windows, the scent of incense, the echo of distant hymns. But what I discovered one evening, when I was alone in the church, shattered my understanding. It all began on a cold Thursday night. I had been asked by Father Matthew to stay after evening mass to help clean the church. Usually I'd leave straight after the service, but something about that night felt different. It was as if an unseen force had nudged me toward the church when I'd normally go home. As I entered, I noticed the church was eerily quiet. The usual warmth from the candles was absent, and the faint smell of the altar incense was replaced by something musty, as though something old and forgotten had come alive within the walls. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease and made my way down the aisle toward the back room, where the cleaning supplies were kept. I'd been helping Father Matthew with cleaning for years, and I never thought twice about it. The church was old, and the work was just a way of giving back that night, however. As I stood by the doorway ready to fetch the broom and mop, I noticed something that had never been there before. In the far corner of the room, partially obscured by stacks of old hymnals and dusty robes, was a statue. I had been in and out of that sacristy countless times, and never once seen it. The statue was of a figure that didn't seem to belong in a church. It was tall, almost 7 feet, and it was sculpted from dark polished stone. At first glance, it resembled a humanoid figure, but there was something off about it. Its limbs were elongated and spindly, its fingers thin and sharp like claws. The face was grotesque. Features were vaguely human but contorted in a way that gave it a sinister, demonic look. There were horns that curled. I took a step forward, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Something about the statue felt wrong. Unnatural. It seemed out of place in a church, and yet there it was, hidden in the shadows. I walked closer, my feet dragging against the old wooden floorboards. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I knew I should leave. I should go back to my work, pretend I hadn't seen it, but my curiosity overwhelmed me. I reached out a hand, trembling slightly as I touched the stone. It was ice cold. A shiver ran down my spine. As I withdrew my hand, there was something about the way the statue felt, as if it had been waiting for me to touch it. The moment I did, an oppressive weight settled in the room. The air became thick, suffocating, and I struggled to breathe. It was as though the very presence of the statue was distorting the reality around me. I took a step back, my heart racing. Suddenly, the church bell tolled. It was a deep, resonant sound, but there was a discordant note in it, something that didn't belong. It felt wrong, like an omen. I turned and fled from the sacristy, my heart pounding in my chest. The coldness of the air seemed to follow me, creeping through the halls and down the nave of the church. I slammed the door behind me, desperate to get away from that thing, but it felt like the walls were closing in on. I ran to the front of the church, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had disturbed something ancient, something evil. I thought I was imagining things, but the unease gnawed at me, and my instincts told me that the statue wasn't just some forgotten relic. It was something much darker. Father Matthew arrived shortly afterward. I told him what I had seen, my words tumbling out in a frantic blur. His face went pale, and he said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "That statue, it shouldn't be here." I was stunned. "What do you mean? Where did it come from?" Father Matthew ran his hand through his thinning hair, clearly agitated. "It wasn't always in the sacristy. It wasn't part of the original church. I didn't even know it existed until recently." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Father Matthew hesitated, his eyes darting nervously toward the doors. He glanced around as though checking for something unseen. "It's an ancient idol," he said. "It was placed here long before the church was built. It was meant to be sealed away, hidden from view. We thought it was lost to history." "Lost? Why was it hidden?" I asked, stepping closer. Father Matthew's face grew darker, Because it's not a statue of a saint or an angel. It's a statue of a demon, one that was worshipped by a cult centuries ago. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A demon, but why would anyone worship a demon? There are always people, Father Matthew replied, his eyes filled with sorrow, who seek power in the darkest places. This statue was part of a ritual, one meant to summon something from beyond our world. The cult believed that by offering sacrifices to it, they could gain supernatural abilities. But the ritual went horribly wrong. The demon they summoned was bound to the statue, trapped by the prayers of the first priests who came here. We thought it was destroyed, but... I felt a chill creep up my spine as Father Matthew's voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish his sentence. I already knew what he meant. The statue, I whispered. It's alive, isn't it? Father Matthew nodded grimly. It's more than just stone. It's a vessel for something malevolent, something that feeds on fear and darkness. It waits for the right moment to awaken. I stepped back, my mind racing. I couldn't understand why the church, our church, had been keeping this thing hidden for so long. Why hadn't anyone told me? Why hadn't Father Matthew done something sooner? I need to destroy it, I said, the words tumbling out before I could think. We need to get rid of it. Father Matthew shook his head slowly. It's not that simple. We can't just destroy it. If we try, it will only grow stronger. I felt a sense of hopelessness wash over me. Then what are we supposed to do? We have to seal it away again, Father Matthew replied. But we need help. There are ancient rites, prayers, and protections we can use, but they require more than just faith. They require a certain kind of sacrifice. The idea of a sacrifice made my stomach turn. What kind of sacrifice? Father Matthew didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the folds of his robes and pulled out a small, ancient-looking book. It was covered in faded leather, and the pages were yellowed with age. He handed it to me. This is the Book of Binding, he said. It contains the rites and rituals necessary to seal the demon back into its prison, but we must act quickly. The longer it remains free, the more power it will gain. I can't do this alone. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Together, Father Matthew and I would have to perform the ritual. But I knew deep down that it wasn't just the statue we were fighting. It was something far more dangerous, something that had been waiting for centuries to be unleashed. That night, the church was filled with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint sound of our prayers. We stood before the statue, armed with only our faith and the ancient book. As the final words of the ritual left our lips, the room seemed to tremble. The statue's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and for a moment I thought I could hear whispers in the shadows, like voices calling to me from the abyss. But then, just as quickly, the light faded, and the oppressive weight lifted. The statue stood still, its malevolent energy trapped once more. Father Matthew and I collapsed to our knees, exhausted, but relieved. For now, the demon was sealed, but I knew this was far from over. The church, once a place of peace and comfort, would never be the same again.